Hello and welcome back to the Training Tom podcast, the place where I share the lessons I have learned, the challenges I'm currently facing, and the questions I have for my future self. And in today's episode, I'm talking about choices. So let's get into it. Before we dive into this episode about choices, I want to just kind of reflect on a few things over the past couple of weeks and some of the things that, have just been going on in general, because I feel like I've been a bit slack with my posts on social media, with being proactive with the podcast and just the ideas that I've been wanting for this podcast. And I think some of that is down to the busyness of life over the past few weeks, and particularly over the end of January, but also just me not being as proactive, me perhaps not managing my time effectively, and just making, I'm not going to say making the wrong choices, but not necessarily choosing things that are supporting the goals that I have. There we go. And it's perhaps linked to this episode, but I've been very reactive recently, and I'm not going to say I've been panicking, but I've been forced to make time for this podcast rather than choosing to make time for it, and choosing to make time because I enjoy doing it. Because I do really enjoy doing this, but sometimes the mental energy that it takes to record an episode and to come up with a flow that I'm happy with and that feels right for me is challenging. So I put it off, and I don't make the time to overcome that challenge. I just, put it off and do what we all do. Scroll on my phone, watch that TV show that I wanted to watch, spend a few extra hours working instead of doing the things that I really enjoy. So I've been perhaps making choices that are not serving the podcast and not serving the goals and the ambitions that I have for this podcast as well. And it's also reminded me of New Year's resolutions and the goals that we set ourselves right at the start of the year. Because the goal that I set myself at the start of this year, and I made this public in the first episode, was to record an episode every single week and to release an episode every single week. Not just for this year, but potentially for the rest of my life. Excuse me. And when I think about the goal that I set myself, I was filled with enthusiasm at the start of the year because of the time of year that it was, because I was starting something new, and because it felt fresh and exciting. Now, you might feel the same way with a goal that you've set yourself for the new year. You might feel like you're in a place now, half term has just finished or has recently finished. And you might feel like you're in a place where that enthusiasm has dropped, the excitement of starting a new goal has worn off, and you're starting to experience some challenges around achieving that goal, a bit like I am with this podcast at the moment. So I want to ask you this. I want to ask you, how are your New Year's resolutions going? Have you taken any time to reflect on the things that have been working well and the things that have been making it more difficult for you to achieve your goal? And the reason I ask you that is because I'm also asking the same questions of myself around the goals that I've set myself for this year. I've recently spoken about a fitness challenge that I have coming up in 2025. And again, I'm asking myself those questions around the goal that I have for that. But the reason I ask it with half term being so recently is based on my experience of working in the fitness and the health industry. At the start of the year, there is a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of excitement when people join a gym. And that is felt within the gym environment. The personal trainers love it. The members tend to love the feeling in the gym as well, because everybody is excited, everybody is enthusiastic, and everybody is striving typically towards a fitness and health related goal. But after a couple of weeks, you notice that the gym is ever so slightly quieter. And the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm has dropped ever so slightly when the realism of achieving this goal sets in. And as the weeks go on, and as you build in towards half term, you might see some of those people come back. You might see other people drop off. But it's never more noticeable than when half term hits, because people's routines completely change. Maybe they go on holiday. Maybe they spend a bit more time with family. Maybe they've got other commitments that mean they're not able to come into the gym. Or maybe simply they're not noticing progress. And half term comes around, the energy in the gym drops significantly, or at least in my experience anyway. The energy in the gym drops significantly, and it doesn't pick up again until later on in the year. And it's normally around May half term, when people have got summer holidays coming up and they realise they haven't achieved the goals that they set themselves. But there's a big period of time between February half term and May half term that is often a period of flux, where people perhaps drop back into the gym once or twice, but never truly find their routine. So I'm asking you these questions to try and prevent that from happening for you, but also to try and prevent that from happening to me. Reflect on how half term went. Reflect on the things that you did. If you spent more time with family, there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that's a really positive thing. Reflect on how you've been working towards your goal over the start of this year. Are there things that you can change to make it more achievable? Are there things that you can do differently to make achieving this goal easier? And a really good way to reflect on that is by finding information or listening to the book or reading the book or finding a YouTube video on a book called Atomic Habits. I've partly read this book, haven't read it all the way through, but I've seen YouTube videos on the whole book and the way that it's explained, and I've listened to interviews with the author as well. And that really highlights how we can change our behaviour in a very simple way, how we can achieve the things that we want to achieve. And even me just talking about it at the moment is reminding me that I need to go back to that book. I need to finish reading it, or I need to listen to those interviews again to remind myself of those things that I can do to support myself in achieving those goals and changing my behaviours to make achieving that goal easier. But in short, the easier you can make achieving your goal, the more obvious you can make the things that you need to do to achieve that goal, the more satisfactory the reward feels, the more likely you are to want to achieve that goal. So put processes and put steps in place to make it easier for you to do the things that you need to do in order to achieve your goal. And even talking through it now, I know that there are things that I can do, like setting aside time, making sure my camera is out, making sure my microphone is out on those days, so that when I do come round to recording, there are less barriers to recording these episodes. So that's something for me to be aware of. and that's something for you to perhaps think about going away from this episode, is, are the things that I'm doing at the moment making it as easy and as clear as possible for me to achieve my goals? I'll let you reflect on that. And it also links in to this week's episode on choices. And this episode was sparked by a conversation that I heard on another podcast. I've referenced it plenty of times, Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom. He recorded an episode recently with Alex Hormozy, who is a businessman and, just generally an incredible businessman. And he said something that really stuck with me. And it struck a chord as well. If you can choose to be annoyed for no reason, you can choose to be happy for no reason too. Now, I find that sometimes I get frustrated at home for no reason. I'm just simply annoyed. I don't know why I'm annoyed. Maybe I need to reflect a bit more on why I'm annoyed, or maybe I need to share my emotions a bit more to understand why I feel annoyed. But I just simply feel annoyed, and it feels like I'm annoyed for no reason. So therefore, I'm making a conscious choice to be annoyed and be annoyed for no reason. So if I can choose to be annoyed for no reason, then I can also make a conscious choice to not be annoyed, to be happy perhaps, to feel excited, to express my emotions, to just simply be present and to be content instead. And it also made me realise that we all have choices. We all have choices that we make every single day, and some of those choices seem small and they seem really insignificant. And it links in with what I was talking about a minute ago with our goals and our New Year's resolutions. Simply from my background, I'm going to use fitness as a goal. If you have a fitness or a weight loss goal, you might decide that you want to go to the gym 3 times a week. Doesn't matter what those days are, but you might decide, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week to help me achieve my goal. It might seem really easy at first. The excitement is there, the enthusiasm is there. But as time goes on, that excitement, that enthusiasm, it drops. And you've probably noticed this in goals that you've had. I've certainly noticed this. And then it becomes more difficult to say, yes, I'm going to go to the gym. But a lot of the time, we give ourselves an alternative. We give ourselves choices. I can choose to go to the gym, or I can choose to go to the gym tomorrow. I can choose to go to the gym today, or I can choose to go to the gym tomorrow. That means that today, I'm going to choose not to go to the gym, but tomorrow I definitely will go to the gym. But how often does tomorrow never come? How often do we make a choice to do something later on in our lives, and that later on never arrives? Because we always say, I'll do that tomorrow. And before we know it, the goal that we were working towards has changed. Or we're no longer working towards that goal at all. The habits that we had in place at the start, we no longer, or the behaviours, should I say, that we've had in place at the start, we no longer exhibit those behaviours. And we stay exactly where we are. Now that choice not to go to the gym that choice not to go to the gym today might have seemed like a really insignificant decision at the time. But a year later, that choice not to go to the gym today could mean that you're even further away from the goal that you set yourself. So we all have choices that we can make. But it also reminds me of the paradox of choice as well. We often want to have lots of options. We often want to feel like we have free will and give ourselves an opportunity to explore different options, not just in fitness, but in life in general, with our career, with our relationships. And I think that's ever more present in today's world with online dating. We want to have options. We want to make sure we choose the best option. And another way to think about this is the Netflix phenomenon, or another way of phrasing this is the Netflix phenomenon. And it's a really good metaphor for the choices that we give ourselves. How often have you, either with your partner, with friends, or with your family, or even alone, opened Netflix and decided you wanted to watch a film, but spent more time deciding what you wanted to watch than actually watching the film? Just think about that for a second. How long have you spent deciding on what film to watch that it's actually taken longer to decide than it has to watch the film? And the reason for that is because you experienced the paradox of choice. You had so many options available to you, you were overwhelmed, so you either didn't make a decision at all, or it took you too long to make a decision. Sometimes it might actually be better for us to give ourselves less options. And maybe even no options at all. If I come back to that fitness goal that I mentioned before, rather than giving yourself the option of going to the gym today or going to the gym tomorrow, instead of saying, I could go today, I could go tomorrow, how about we say, I am going to the gym today, and I am going to the gym tomorrow? That way we've removed the decision. We've removed the choice. We've told ourselves we are going to do something. So we do it. We haven't given ourselves options, therefore we haven't bombarded ourselves with information. We haven't given ourselves the opportunity to say no. We've just done it. And if we also think about the amount of decisions we have to make in a day, there are lots of decisions that are far more important. Some of those decisions are really insignificant. What am I going to wear today? What food am I going to eat? What time am I going to wake up? All of those things are really small decisions. But they build up as the day goes on. So then when we get to the end of the day and we have to decide to go to the gym, it makes it harder to make that decision because we experience something called decision fatigue. We're so tired with the amount of decisions that we've had to make already that we choose the easy option, which doesn't help us achieve our personal goals. So sometimes actually removing those choices and saying, I am going to go to the gym today. Maybe by the evening before you go to work, you get your clothes out ready for the day ahead. So you don't have to choose what to wear in the morning. The decision is already made for you. Maybe instead of deciding what to eat on the day by looking in the fridge and looking in the cupboards, you plan what meals you're going to eat ahead of time. You plan what ingredients you need ahead of time so that you know exactly what you're eating and what day, what time you're going to eat it. The same time with when you wake up in the morning. Instead of setting different alarms every single day, how about setting one alarm for every day and not giving yourself a choice? It might sound very simple for me to say all of these things, but it's just from learned experience, from working in the fitness industry for, goodness, 11 years now, for going into gyms for 13, 14 years, for setting myself goals every single year. And in the past, choosing not to work towards those goals in the most effective way, by giving myself too much choice. But sometimes actually removing decision from our lives makes our lives easier. It provides us with less decisions so that we can spend more time thinking about the important decisions, like who we're going to spend the rest of our life with, what job we want to have in the future, where we want to spend our time, who we want to spend it with, and the environment that we surround ourselves in. In essence, every choice has a consequence. Sometimes that consequence is good, sometimes that consequence is bad. And the way that I'm trying to frame my decisions now is, am I choosing short-term gratification or long-term success, or long-term fulfillment, you might say? Short-term gratification typically comes with longer-term pain. Longer-term fulfillment might come with a bit of short-term pain. But the way that I'm trying to frame things at the moment is by making difficult choices or giving myself less choices now. In the long term, I think I'll live a more fulfilled life. And it also comes down to responsibility. Who is responsible for your life? Are you giving other people responsibility with the choices that you make? Or are you taking responsibility? Now, I'll admit there are some circumstances that make life challenging, that are outside of our control. Some of those things over recent years have been absolutely outside of people's control. Their ethnicity, their religious belief, the area of the country that they live in, their socio-economic status. But it's still our responsibility, regardless of that circumstance. It's still our responsibility for how we deal with that situation, for how we deal with the cards that we've been dealt. We've all been dealt different cards in this life. And we can either choose for other people to influence that heavily, and for us to potentially even blame society and blame the world for the cards that we've been dealt. Or we can choose to take responsibility. We can look at those cards and we can say to ourselves, this might not be the cards that I wanted to have, but they're the cards that I've been given. So how can I make the most with these cards? How can I take responsibility for these cards, and how can I try and create the best out of this situation? And it's a consistent theme of guests on the High Performance podcast, another fantastic podcast that I really enjoy listening to. They interview a range of guests about high performance, about their lives, about the choices they have made. And one thing that is consistent across all of those episodes is people take responsibility for their life. And in some of their situations, it'd be very easy for them to be a victim. But they make a conscious decision to take responsibility and to take control of the things that they can. A way I like to term this is controlling the controllables. There are lots of things in this world that are outside of our control, but the things that are within our control are where we spend our time, or how we spend our time, what energy we give to different tasks, and how we utilize our mindset. we are in full control of our thoughts. We are in full control of our energy. So how are we going to take control of that and utilize it to support us in achieving the things that we want to achieve? And the last thing I want to mention on this episode of Choices is something from growth mindset. And I think it summarizes this notion of choosing and responsibility and taking control very nicely. It might not be your fault, but you are responsible for how you respond. There are lots of things that happen in this life that are not our fault, that are outside of our control, where fault could easily be blamed on somebody else. But it's still our responsibility for how we react to that situation. It's still our responsibility for how we use our energy towards that situation. And it's our responsibility how we control our mindset and our thoughts towards that situation. You might not be where you want to be. You might not feel like you were dealt the best cards in this world. But we all have a responsibility to choose how we deal with that. You might be struggling with the goal that you set yourself for this year or for this life. But it's our responsibility. It's your responsibility of how you manage that. And you can choose to take responsibility. You can choose to be more proactive with your time, with your energy, to get you closer to achieving that goal. And you can choose the thoughts that you have and your mindset and your approach to your life. The choice now is, are you going to take that decision? Are you going to choose to take responsibility and ownership over your life? Or are you going to choose to stay the same? That's a decision that I can't make for you. I know the decision that I am making, and I know what I'm choosing to do. Perhaps you need to think about the same thing as well. Thank you for listening. As always, my name is Tom Regan, and this is the Training Tom podcast.